Arizona Territory. 1879, the sun was punishing in Bisbee that day, high and cruel over the mining town, when Katherine June was tied to the hitching post outside the saloon for speaking her mind. She stood barefoot in the dirt, wrists bound with coarse rope above her head, her long dark hair tangled from a scuffle that left her lip bloodied but her spirit unbent. The men who tied her there, 3 of them, all smug with drink, had not liked her tone when she told them to keep their hands to themselves. They laughed as they walked back inside, the saloon doors swinging behind them. Katherine did not cry. She locked her jaw and kept her gaze on the far horizon, where the red dust met the sky. A slow swell of anger burned behind her ribs, not just for the rope chafing her wrists or the men inside, but for every time she had been told to be quiet, to be small, to endure. She had endured enough. A rider came in from the west, his horse kicking up clouds of orange dust as he slowed near the post. He was tall in the saddle, lean with a steady hand on the reins, a rifle strapped behind his back. His hat shaded sharp eyes that took in the scene in one long sweep. He dismounted without hurry, tying off his horse before stepping forward. He drew a knife from his belt and sliced the rope with one clean motion. Katherine stumbled forward, but he caught her by the arms. "You all right?" he asked. She looked up at him, breath short. "I was, until they tied me up like a dog." He studied her face for a long second, eyes narrowing a touch, then he gave a single nod. "I like a girl with fire," he said. Katherine blinked, surprised by the softness under the grit of his voice. "That's supposed to be a compliment," he grinned, not mocking, genuine. "Sure is." She rubbed her wrists. "What's your name, cowboy?" "Holden Dyer," he said. "And you?" "Katherine June." "Well, Katherine June, what do you say we go get your things and get the hell out of this town?" She hesitated, glancing toward the saloon. "They'll follow." "Let them," he said. "They will not like how that ends." Katherine held his gaze, weighing him. Then she gave a small nod. "My things are at the boarding house. Upstairs room, second door on the left." Holden helped her onto his horse, then led them down the street. No one stopped them. Most folks knew better than to get in Holden Dyer's business. He had a reputation out this way, quiet, fast with a rifle, and mean only when pushed. At the boarding house, Katherine packed fast. She had little enough. 2 dresses, a worn book of poems, a cloth pouch of coins, and a silver brooch that had been her mother's. She came down the stairs to find Holden waiting, arms crossed, watching the street. They rode out of town by dusk, side by side, without a word between them for a long time. The desert opened around them, painted gold and rust by the setting sun. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was steady. Like him, a few miles out they stopped to make camp. Katherine gathered kindling while Holden built a fire. He did not ask questions. He just handed her a tin cup once the coffee was hot and passed her a strip of jerky. She chewed slowly, watching him from across the flames. "You always go around cutting women loose?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I know what it is to be stuck somewhere you do not belong." She looked into the fire. "My husband died 3 years ago. He was kind. The men in that town were not. I stayed for work, but they never let me forget I was alone. Today I told one of them to keep his mouth shut. He did not like that." Holden nodded once, quiet. "You got family?" "None left, just me." He poked at the fire with a stick, jaw tight. "You got a place you want to go?" She shook her head. "I just want to be somewhere no one's got the right to put a rope on me." Holden met her eyes. "Then ride with me. I am headed north near Prescott, got a cabin and some land. You would be safe there." Katherine was quiet. The wind shifted across the desert, warm and soft. She looked at him, really looked. He was not just kind, he was solid, like the edge of a canyon that would not fall. "All right," she said. They shared a bedroll that night, but not for warmth or want, just to feel safe. She fell asleep beside him, the fire low, the sky full of stars. In the weeks that followed, they rode slow through the high country. Katherine learned Holden had grown up in the territory, raised by his older brother after their parents died of fever. His brother had been shot in a land dispute 10 years back. Since then, Holden had lived quiet and alone. Katherine told him about her husband, who built furniture and danced with her in the kitchen on Sundays. About the child they lost in childbirth. She told him how grief had made her hard but not hollow. He listened. Really listened, and every day something in her softened. Not because he asked her to, but because she wanted to. One morning, as they were breaking camp near a cottonwood grove, Holden handed her a small leather pouch. Inside was a silver ring, simple but strong. "It was my mother's," he said. "I have carried it a long time. I want you to have it." Katherine looked up at him, lips parting in surprise. "Why?" "Because I have never met a woman who looked the devil in the eye and said not today and lived to tell about it. You belong somewhere, you are respected, and I would give you that." She stared at him, the wind tugging at her hair, her heart climbing up into her throat. "I did not think there were men left like you," she said. "There are not many," he said, "but I am real, and I am here." Katherine stepped close, slid the ring onto her finger. It fit. She looked up at him. "I am not easy." "I do not want easy," he said, voice low. "I want you." She kissed him, then slow, certain. And when he kissed her back, it was with a hunger he had buried deep and a care that made her knees weak. That night they laid down together under the cottonwoods, and for the first time in years, Katherine June felt wanted. Not for her looks or her defiance, but for everything she was, fire and all. The trail north rose into cooler air, where pines thinned the sun and the ground turned from dust to needles and stone. Katherine rode steady beside Holden, her back straighter now, her eyes no longer scanning behind them but forward. Each mile settled something in her shoulders, like a weight she hadn't known she carried was slowly being lowered to the ground. They reached Prescott's Edge by late summer, where the land turned green and the mountains stood like folded arms around the valley. Holden's cabin sat a half-day's ride west of town, tucked against a ridge of dark rock, with a small creek threading the property. The place wasn't large, but the porch was wide and the roof sound. "Built it with my brother," he said, dismounting and handing her the reins. "Took 2 winters. You'll be warm come snowfall." Katherine ran her fingers along the porch post, the wood sun worn but solid. "It smells like cedar and ash. Used both. You'll learn to tell which walls creak in wind and which ones don't." Inside, the floor held the scuff of old boots and the scent of tobacco and iron. A rifle hung above the fireplace, and shelves lined with jars and tins stood neat along one wall. She noticed a half-carved wooden spoon on the table beside a block of soap wrapped in cloth. Nothing was showy, but everything had been shaped with care. Holden set down her satchel in the corner. "There's one bed. I can sleep on the floor till you're comfortable." Katherine stepped past him and laid her hand on the quilt. "I don't need distance to feel safe," she said. "Just honesty." He met her gaze, his own steady. "You'll have that, every day." They settled into rhythm without speaking on it. He chopped wood at dawn, and she learned the rhythm of the stove, and the way the creek water tasted better after sitting in the cool cellar. They planted turnips and cabbages in the sloped garden, and when a storm came through one night and split the oak near the barn, they worked side by side to clear the limbs before rot set in. One evening, as she scrubbed her hands at the basin, she said, "You always mean to live out this far." Holden wiped the blade of his knife clean on a rag. "Town's too loud, too full of people quick to talk and slow to act. Out here, things speak only when they need to." She dried her hands. "I used to think noise meant life. Now I think it just hides what matters." He looked up. "What matters to you now?" She leaned against the table, considering, waking up without dread, having a name that's not whispered like a warning. "Someone I don't have to explain myself to." Holden set the knife down. "You don't owe me any part of yourself, but you've got all the room you want to be known." She studied him for a moment longer, then crossed the space between them and laid her head against his chest. His arms came around her slow, not from uncertainty, but reverence. They stood like that until the fire burned low, days passed, and the garden took root. Katherine began leaving paper scraps on the table, notes on when to turn the soil or how much water the beans needed. One morning, Holden found a sketch of a chair beside the stove. He picked it up, turning it in his hands. "You draw like a craftsman," he said. "My husband taught me joints and grain before he passed." I was better with pencil than saw. He walked to the shed and brought back a stack of pine planks, setting them on the porch. "Then we'll build it." They did over a week, between chores. She marked the angles he cut, and they joined the pieces with patience. When it was done, it sat firm and square by the hearth. "You've got good hands," he told her. "Yours don't miss a mark," she said. Later, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, she sat in the chair and pulled him down beside her. Their fingers laced without thought. That night, she lit the lamp and opened the window just wide enough to let in the sound of crickets. She turned to him where he sat on the edge of the bed, unbuckling his boots. "You ever think about what comes after all this?" she asked. He looked up. "After what?" "The quiet, the building. When it's not just surviving anymore." Holden nodded once. "I think about waking up with you beside me and not wondering how long I've got left to hold it. I think about a table with 2 chairs, a rooster out back, and maybe a second pair of boots in the corner one day." Katherine brushed hair behind her ear. "I think I could want that too." He reached for her hand and kissed her knuckles, then looked up at her, quiet and sure. "You don't have to want it today, but if you ever do, it's yours." She bent and pressed her lips to his brow, then his mouth. When they undressed, it wasn't urgent, it was careful, a promise made with each touch. The window let in moonlight, and she let herself be seen every scar, every breath, every part of her she'd guarded by morning. The creak hummed like a low hymn, and her head rested on his shoulder. The quilt was tangled, and the world outside began without rush. She didn't ask what they were now. She didn't need to. She already knew autumn set in slow, laying gold across the hills and thinning the creek with cool mornings. Katherine took to walking the boundary lines after sunrise, a wool shawl tight around her shoulders, the sky pale and wide above her. Holden would already be at the barn, mending the stall door or seeing to the mule's sore leg. They'd fallen into something neither of them named, but it didn't need naming. Each day built on the last without wobble or doubt. That steadiness comforted her more than any oath could. One crisp morning, Holden came in with a letter in his hand, the paper creased and travel-worn. "Ryder came through from Camp Verde," he said, setting it on the table. "Left this for you." Katherine stared at the envelope. "No one writes me." "It's addressed in a woman's hand," he said, then pulled the kettle to the flame. She opened it with careful fingers. Her eyes moved slow over the page, then stopped. "It's Miriam," she said finally. "She worked laundry beside me in Bisbee, said she left 2 weeks after I did. Things got worse there." She folded the letter again, setting it down. "She's in Prescott now, living near the livery yard, working for a widow who runs a boarding house." "You want to see her?" he asked. "I do," Katherine said. "I need to know she's all right." They rode into town that afternoon. The streets were busier than she remembered, carts loaded with feed and tools, women carrying sacks of flour and bolts of calico. A boy called out the price of apples from a cart near the church. Katherine found Miriam behind the house off Montezuma, hanging linens on a line strung between 2 posts. Her face lit up when she saw Katherine, and they embraced in the yard, both holding on longer than polite company allowed. "Lord, you look different," Miriam said, stepping back. "Better," Katherine smiled. "I feel it." Holden tipped his hat politely, then excused himself to the smithy to check on a tool order. "Is he yours?" Miriam asked as they stepped inside the kitchen. "He doesn't own me," Katherine said, "but he sees me." "That's better." They talked over tea, the kind that tasted more like bark than comfort, but neither of them minded. Miriam spoke of nights sleeping with a knife under her pillow, of a man who tried to drag her into the alley behind the mercantile. Katherine listened, her hand tightening on her cup. "You were always the brave one," Miriam said. "You remember when you told off Mr. Holly for shorting our pay? I remember getting docked for it the next week. Still, I envied it." Katherine shook her head. "It wasn't bravery. It was not knowing how to give in." When she rejoined Holden outside, he handed her a wrapped parcel. "New hinges for the shed door," he said. "And I got us a sack of winter wheat seed." They rode home under a quiet sky, the wind pressed at their backs as if urging them forward. That night, Katherine stood beside the stove watching the flames flicker through the iron grate. "She's tougher than she looks," she said. Holden stood behind her, arms folded. "So are you," she turned. "I want her to come spend Sunday with us, make bread, sit by the fire." "Just a day," he nodded. "Then Sunday it is." She stepped closer. "You never ask why I need these things." "I don't have to," he said. "I see what settles you." She reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw. "You do that for me too." They didn't speak the rest of the evening. They didn't need to. On Sunday, Miriam arrived before noon, cheeks pink from the ride and hands full of dried sage and biscuits wrapped in a cloth. The three of them prepared stew in the kitchen, trading stories of old bosses and worse meals, and by afternoon, laughter warmed the walls more than the fire. As the sun lowered, Holden brought out the fiddle he kept stored in a wooden case beneath the bed. He tuned it slow, then played a tune Katherine hadn't heard in years, low and rich, with a rhythm that wrapped around the room like old memory. Miriam tapped her foot. "I didn't know he played." "I didn't either," Katherine said, eyes soft. Later, when Miriam rode back toward town, Holden and Katherine sat on the porch steps, her head resting against his shoulder. "You've got a gift for making people feel like they matter," he said. She looked ahead, watching the last streaks of orange fade behind the ridge. "I spent too long being treated like I didn't. I won't let anyone else feel that way if I can help it." Holden's hand found hers. "You ever think about what you'd do if things had gone different sometimes?" she said. "But not the way I used to. Now I think more on what I'll do next." He turned toward her. "And what's next?" She looked at him, steady. "Building something that lasts. With you." He kissed her gently, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything but gave everything. And when the stars came out, they sat in silence, their fingers still laced, the porch warm beneath them, the night soft around their shoulders. By late October, the trees nearest the creek had shed their leaves, and the mornings came edged with frost. Katherine rose earlier now, drawn not by need, but by the quiet rhythm of a place becoming hers. She'd taken to keeping ledgers, scraps of paper pinned inside a book where she tracked what they planted, what they stored, what they'd need come winter's depth. Holden had added a latch to the root cellar door and carved pegs by the hearth for her shawls. He didn't speak of it, but she noticed. He noticed things, too, how she'd started humming while she washed up, how she always added a pinch of salt last when cooking beans, how she stepped outside each dusk to watch the light leave the ridge. One evening, she found him seated at the table with a folded map, a length of twine stretched across it. "What's that for?" she asked, setting a bowl of boiled turnips down. "Measuring fence line," he said. "I've been thinking on adding another acre to the pasture. The soil's better near the south bend and the mule's not enough for it all." She sat, brushing her hands clean on her apron. "You planning on getting cattle, not a herd," he said. "A few head, maybe raise a calf or two, something steady." She watched him loop the twine again, his hands sure. "You thinking of staying here for good?" Holden didn't look up right away. "I don't make decisions halfway." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his wrist. "Then let's build it together." They spent the next weeks marking posts. Katherine held the measure while Holden dug, the earth cold and stubborn. She learned the sound of a shovel hitting stone, learned how to brace her back when lifting, how to wrap rawhide around a post to keep it from splitting. One afternoon, as they rested beneath a bluff, Holden passed her a tin canteen and leaned back on his elbows. "You ever think about teaching?" he asked. "You've got a way of making things make sense." She raised an eyebrow. "Teaching what?" "How to wash clothes with lye and creek water," he laughed, low in his chest. "No, reading, writing. There's a schoolhouse in town barely used. The last teacher left 2 seasons ago. Town council's been looking." Katherine sat quiet for a moment, watching a hawk wheel above them. "I did some teaching back in Arkansas before I married. Children mostly. Letters, scripture, sums. You'd be good at it still." She tapped a finger against her boot. "I'd have to ride in most days, might not be home till near dark." "I'll keep supper warm," he said. She studied his face, the way his eyes didn't shift or search. "You're not afraid of me wanting more than these hills." Holden pulled a blade of grass between his fingers. "I want whatever makes you feel full. As long as you ride back to me." That night, she wrote a letter to the council and left it with the storekeeper when they went in for feed. A week later, she returned with a satchel of slates and chalk and a note folded in her bodice. "They want me to start in 2 Mondays, she said, setting the satchel on the table. 3 children to begin with, maybe more if it goes well." Holden nodded. "We'll need to haul more wood. You'll want heat when the snow starts." She stepped close and pressed her palm to his chest. "This is why I can leave each morning, because I've got this to come home to." He kissed her then, not in hunger but deep and slow, like a man who'd been waiting for something worth keeping. The first day of teaching, she wore her navy dress and tied her hair back with a strip of muslin. Holden saddled her horse before sunrise, packed her bread and dried apples, and handed her a small wrapped bundle. "Open it there," he said. "Not before." She rode through fog and frost, the world hushed. At the schoolhouse, 3 children sat on mismatched benches, wide-eyed and silent. She set her satchel down, unwrapped the bundle, and found a small wooden bell inside, carved smooth. Her initials etched faintly on the handle. When the children asked what it was for, she rang it once, clear and bright. "To begin," she said. That evening, she returned to the cabin with chalk dust on her cuffs and a quiet smile. Holden met her at the porch, took her satchel and pressed a kiss to her temple. "I missed the sound of your step," he said. "I miss this light," she replied, glancing at the glow spilling from the windows. As the days shortened and the cold deepened, they built something neither of them had planned for, not just shelter, not just survival, but a life that held room for both stillness and motion, for old wounds and new beginnings. And every night, when the fire burned low and the wind spoke against the walls, Katherine laid her head against Holden's chest and slept without fear. The first real snow came before the last of the wheat was stored, soft and early, more hush than storm, but enough to coat the ridge in white and slow the creek to a whisper. Katherine stood at the schoolhouse window that morning, watching the flakes drift past glass panes that breathed cold. The children had not come. Their families lived far and the frost had stiffened the roads. She didn't mind the stillness. She lit the stove, tucked a shawl around her shoulders, and read from a book she'd borrowed from the storekeeper's shelf, a thick volume of natural philosophy, pages heavy with ink. When the shadows lengthened and the light turned blue at the edges, she mounted and rode home along the trail she could now navigate by heart. Holden met her by the barn, his coat dusted with snow and his palms rough with fresh calluses. "Fence held," he said. "No windfall yet." "Schoolhouse was quiet," Katherine said, brushing snow from her sleeve. "I didn't mind." He took her reins without another word, led the horse inside, and returned with her satchel just as she stepped into the cabin. The warmth inside was slower today, the fire banked low, but the smell of roasted onion and salt pork drifted from the hearth. She warmed her hands by the stove, then sat at the table as he ladled stew into a tin bowl. They ate in silence, the kind that came not from distance but from ease. After supper, Holden opened the drawer beneath the counter and pulled out a folded cloth. He laid it in front of her. "I found it in my brother's trunk," he said. "He was saving it for a wedding, never got to use it." Katherine unfolded it carefully. Inside was a strip of lace, hand-tatted, yellowed just slightly with age. She ran her fingers along the edge. "It's beautiful," she said. "I thought it could trim a collar or a veil," he said, "if you wanted." She looked up slowly. "Are you asking me to marry you, Holden Dyer?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low and sure. "I'm asking if you want to make what we've got permanent, if you want to build the rest of it with me. Names shared, land shared. Life shared." Katherine stood, walked to the hearth, and faced the fire for a moment, her jaw set in thought. Then she turned. "I do," she said. "I want it all. With you." They married that next Sunday at the edge of the ridge where the trees opened wide to the sky. Miriam stood beside Katherine, her borrowed shawl pulled tight, and recited a poem in place of scripture. Old Mr. Harrow, who held the town's marriage license, brought a book bound in cracked leather and asked the questions with a solemn voice. Holden wore his brother's coat. Katherine pinned the lace to her collar with a brooch she hadn't worn since her first wedding. It felt different now, earned, not borrowed. After the vows, they walked back to the cabin, the snow crunching beneath their boots. Miriam and Mr. Harrow stayed long enough to share cornbread and cider, then rode back toward town, their silhouettes small against the rising moon. That night, Holden lit a single candle and held Katherine's hand beneath the quilt, their fingers warm between them. "Feels like the world's gone quiet," he said. "It's not quiet," Katherine murmured, resting her head against his chest. "It's full, just not loud." By the time the snow deepened to its midwinter hush, Katherine had taken to teaching at the cabin on days when the road was too thick for wagons. Children came bundled in wool, cheeks red, boots carrying the sound of childhood into their home. Holden built a bench along the wall for coats and gloves. The children called him Mr. Dyer and asked him questions about how to use a drawknife or what kind of tree made the best sled runners. Spring came late, but when it did, it arrived soft and full, violets blooming near the creek, birds nesting in the eaves. Katherine planted early lettuce and peas, and Holden dug a trench for a second row of squash. The fence held through the thaw, and one of the heifers birthed a calf with a white blaze on its forehead. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching smoke curl from the chimney and the calf buck awkwardly near the hayricks, Katherine turned her face toward him. "I never thought I'd have this," she said. Holden didn't look away from the horizon. "What changed? You did," she said. "You gave me a place where I didn't have to prove I belonged." He reached over and took her hand, calloused and warm. "You belong here because you chose it. Same as I chose you." Years passed and the hills remained. The schoolhouse reopened with more students, but Katherine still taught from the cabin when the roads turned bad. Holden built a second shed, then a third for tools. They grew modest, but steady enough for comfort, not more. They grew older in the way people do when they are loved, gently, with laugh lines and stronger roots than they ever expected. And every night, as the fire settled and the wind moved through the trees, they lay side by side, hands entwined, hearts unhurried, a quiet life. A full life. Theirs.